that, like, okay, you're saying something that's actually factually inaccurate according to the narrative. Now, let's be real clear. I don't necessarily think they know what's going on yet. There's a lot of weird shit going on with this.
I know.
First of all, there was that one guy who was the decoy.
What if I told you the story of the Charlie Kirk assassination attempt isn't as straightforward as the headlines made it seem? What if the bizarre details, the strange witnesses, and the unbelievable coincidences point to something far murkier, something almost staged? From pants pulled down in public to a rifle with no serial number, this isn't just a news story, it's a rabbit hole. And once you start going down, it's hard to climb back out. Let's start with one of the most bizarre characters in the entire event, the so-called decoy. This man wasn't some random bystander who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. No, this was someone who had been seen before, at 9/11, at the Boston bombing, at another fake bomb scare. And then, suddenly, here he was again, right after the shots went off at Charlie Kirk's event. And what did he do? He began yelling, "I did it! I did it!" as he stripped his pants off. It sounds insane. In fact, it is insane. But the strangeness didn't end there. Almost immediately after this bizarre outburst, this man was arrested, not for the shooting, but on charges of child pornography. And just like that, he vanished from the conversation. Locked away. Impossible to interview, impossible to question further. Convenient, isn't it? Now, the internet was quick to connect the dots. How does one man manage to show up at multiple high-profile national tragedies? How does he always end up in the frame, like some recurring extra in a movie nobody asked for? The odds are essentially zero, and yet there he was. If this were just a random chance, it would be the most unlucky or maybe the most suspicious coincidence in recent history. But the weirdness doesn't stop with the decoy. It also extends to the supposed shooter himself. Let's think about what we were told. A young 22-year-old man with little to no experience suddenly pulls off a near impossible shot. We're talking about a prone position, 200 yards out, dead on with a rifle. Experts weighed in almost immediately. They said, listen, if you set the rifle to 0 at 200 yards, it's not impossible. In fact, it's doable. You could learn it in a day. But that's only if someone trains you. If you've never handled a scope before, if you've never aligned reticles or adjusted for distance, you're not pulling off that kind of precision. Not without help. And yet, this is what the narrative demanded we believe, that this random young man, without significant military or sniper training, lined up the perfect shot and executed it under pressure. Sure, if you handed the gun to a Navy SEAL sniper, he could probably train you to hit targets at that distance within a few hours. But without that kind of coaching, without preparation, it stretches belief. Now, some skeptics pointed out that it wasn't just about hitting the target, it was about the weapon itself. Was the shooter using iron sights or a modern scope? That detail matters. With iron sights, 140 to 200 yards becomes a nightmare of precision. You have to align every notch perfectly, every fraction of movement, changing the trajectory. With the scope, things are easier. But even then, experts couldn't confirm whether the rifle actually had a working scope attached at the time. And speaking of the rifle, this is where the story gets even stranger. Early photos suggested it was a modern composite stock rifle, maybe something like a 30-06 bolt action with a decent scope, a completely believable, accurate setup. But then the official story shifted. Suddenly, this was supposed to be an ancient family heirloom, a rifle from World War I, without a serial number. Think about that for a second. Why would anyone choose a century-old rifle for a high-profile shooting? Yes, it's true that with enough work from a skilled gunsmith, even old weapons can be tuned for accuracy, but why risk it? Why not use something modern, reliable, and traceable? The official explanation simply doesn't add up. It's almost as if the weapon itself was planted, chosen specifically because it would confuse the narrative. And then there's the logistics of it all. Authorities claim that the shooter disassembled the rifle, carried it in a backpack, and then reassembled it after reaching the rooftop. Let's pause on that. Do you know how much skill it takes to properly disassemble and then reassemble a rifle? Under pressure. Even trained gunsmiths take time, and that's without the added stress of preparing for a live assassination attempt. On top of that, the size of the rifle itself makes the story even harder to swallow. Anyone who's ever carried a long rifle knows you're not stuffing it neatly into a school-sized backpack and pulling it out like a magic trick. Yet this was the narrative we were expected to accept. The shooter climbs a roof unnoticed, he disassembles and reassembles an old, supposedly serialist rifle, he sets his sights, lines up the shot, and pulls it off with near-perfect precision, despite limited training. And then somehow, after all this, he jumps from the roof, escapes momentarily, only to be captured with a weapon that doesn't quite match the original description. And here's the kicker. We actually saw a video of him jumping off the roof, caught on a cell phone, which raises the question, was this really the shooter? Or just someone placed there to be seen, to muddy the waters, while the real story happened out of frame? One detail after another turns this incident from a straightforward attack into something more theatrical, more scripted. And the deeper you go, the harder it is to see it as pure coincidence.
The first major contradiction revolves around the shooter's weapon. At first, it was described as a modern composite stock rifle with a powerful scope, exactly the kind of tool you'd expect in a professional setup. That made sense. It explained the accuracy, the clean shot, and the technical precision. But then, almost overnight, the narrative shifted. Suddenly, officials claimed it was an antique rifle, a family heirloom nearly 100 years old without a serial number. Why does this matter? Because the version of the rifle changes the entire story. If it were a modern scoped rifle, then the precision makes sense, but so does the idea of outside training or professional help. If it was an old iron-sighted relic, then we're expected to believe this 22-year-old pulled off a miracle shot with outdated technology that most gun ranges wouldn't even allow on the line today. It's a narrative designed to stretch our belief either way. And let's not forget the bizarre claim that the rifle was disassembled and carried up to the rooftop in a backpack. Anyone who's actually handled long rifles knows this is absurd. The barrel length alone makes it impossible to fit into a standard backpack without looking suspicious. And even if you could, how many amateurs can break down and reassemble a rifle under pressure in the middle of an assassination plot with flawless accuracy afterward? That takes military-grade discipline. But here's where it gets really strange: the shooter's rooftop escape. We actually have footage of someone jumping off that roof. It looks dramatic, almost cinematic. But was it really the shooter, or was it part of a staged distraction? Think about it. If you wanted to control the public narrative, you wouldn't leave it to chance. You'd show the audience what they were supposed to believe. A man with a rifle, a man fleeing, a man caught. It's a neat package. But real life is rarely that clean. And let's not forget the bizarre claim that the rifle was disassembled and carried up to the rooftop in a backpack. Anyone who's actually handled long rifles knows this is absurd. The barrel length alone makes it impossible to fit into a standard backpack without looking suspicious. And even if you could, how many amateurs can break down and reassemble a rifle under pressure in the middle of an assassination plot with flawless accuracy afterward? That takes military-grade discipline. But let's go back to the so-called decoy. The man yelling, I did it," while pulling his pants down. Remember him? Conveniently, after his arrest on unrelated charges, the media stopped talking about him. No follow-up, no in-depth reporting, just silence. as if his only role was to create chaos, to distract both the police and the public long enough for the official narrative to lock into place. This pattern, confusion, distraction, shifting details, is the hallmark of a manufactured storyline. First, create chaos, then release an official version that makes sense to the public, even if it doesn't hold up under scrutiny. By the time skeptics raise questions, the majority have already moved on. And it worked. For weeks, the mainstream media recycled the same talking points: lone gunman, troubled youth, antique rifle, tragic attempt. A simple story, digestible for headlines. But beneath the surface, the inconsistencies refused to go away. Even seasoned military snipers began weighing in. They pointed out that hitting a moving or distant target under pressure is a skill honed over years, not something a young man masters overnight. They highlighted how implausible it was to carry and reassemble such a weapon unnoticed. And they asked the question no one else dared: was this really about an assassination attempt, or was it theater? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Every contradiction, every bizarre witness, every strange twist pushes the event further from reality and closer to something scripted. Something designed not just to shock, but to send a message. By now, you've probably realized something. This story doesn't add up. Not the weapon, not the shooter, not the bizarre decoy yelling, "I did it," in the middle of the chaos. The deeper you dig, the less it feels like an assassination attempt, and the more it looks like a carefully staged performance. And that leaves us with one final unsettling question. Why? Let's zoom out. What happens after every high-profile lone gunman event? The same cycle. Chaos, confusion, and then, very quickly, a neatly packaged narrative delivered to the public. We've seen it before, at 9/11, at Boston, at other tragedies where the details never quite matched the headlines. And now, here we are again, with Charlie Kirk at the center. The so-called decoy, who magically appears at multiple national events, disappears into custody, never to be heard from again. The weapon, described one way at first, morphs into something completely different by the time the official reports are released. The rooftop escape caught on video, almost too perfect, like a scene straight out of a movie. Every piece of this puzzle screams manufactured. But here's the real kicker: the psychology behind it. Events like this don't just shock the public, they condition the public. They train people to accept simple answers, to move on quickly, to stop asking questions. If you bombard the audience with chaos and then offer a clean story, most will take it, because the alternative, digging deeper, is too exhausting. And yet, when you actually peel back the layers, the official narrative collapses. Could the shooter have pulled it off with limited training? Highly unlikely. Could an antique rifle really deliver that kind of precision under pressure? Even less likely. Could one man assemble, aim, and execute this plan without help or oversight? Virtually impossible. Which means the only logical conclusion is this: there's more to the story. Whether it was staged, orchestrated, or manipulated, what happened that day wasn't just about Charlie Kirk, it was about control. Control of the narrative, control of the headlines, control of what the public believes is possible. And that's why this matters, because once you see the patterns, once you recognize the same distractions, the same contradictions, the same lone wolf script repeating itself, you can't unsee it. The real danger isn't the so-called shooter. The real danger is the story we were told to believe. So now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe this was the act of a lone, untrained gunman with a century-old rifle? Or do you think we're looking at something far more orchestrated, something staged for the cameras? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation isn't just about Charlie Kirk. It's about how stories are shaped, how truth is twisted, and how easily we can all be manipulated. Don't just watch the news. Question it.